I was on a conference call with my financial advisor when my son's voice cut through the static from another line. He and his wife were calmly discussing how to sell my lake house before I could notice the paperwork. In that frozen moment, my hand moved silently to record. They were talking about a $300,000 property I'd owned for 20 years, and they'd already contacted a realtor. I stayed perfectly quiet on the line, listening to my own future being dismantled. For the last 8 years, I'd let my son and his wife stay in the guest cabin, thinking I was helping them build a future. I'd even added his name to the deed, a decision that now threatened to cost me everything. This wasn't just a plot against a property. It was a betrayal that exploited a parent's greatest vulnerability, trust. And as the recording captured every damning word, I faced a brutal choice: confront my own family or lose the sanctuary I'd spent a lifetime creating. The lake house wasn't just property. It was every summer of my childhood, the place I'd rebuilt with my own hands after my wife passed, and the future I'd imagined for my grandchildren. When my son, Michael, lost his job during the pandemic, letting him and his wife, Chloe, stay there rent-free felt like the right thing to do. A temporary safety net. 2 years later, when property values skyrocketed, he came to me with a proposal. He said adding his name to the deed would help him build credit, secure a small business loan, and finally stand on his own. It felt like a father's final investment in his child's independence. I signed the paperwork at our kitchen table, a gesture of trust I believed was unbreakable. For the first year, nothing changed. They maintained the property, sent photos of sunsets over the water, and called every Sunday. Then the calls became shorter. Visits were always rushed. Last Christmas, Chloe mentioned how much a similar property had sold for down the shore, $320,000. It was a casual remark, but her tone was specific, calculating. 6 months ago, Michael asked for the first time about my will. He framed it as concern for my health, but the subtext was clear. He was mapping an inheritance. The pressure points emerged quietly. My annual property tax bill arrived, and Michael suggested we split it, citing his newfound ownership stake. Then came the proposal to modernize the kitchen and docks, with quotes from contractors he knew, suggesting I take a home equity loan to fund it. Each request was a gentle probe, testing the boundaries of what I would finance. I began to notice patterns. Conversations always circled back to the lake house's value, its potential, its equity. My sanctuary was being appraised in real time by my own family. The first major turning point came on a Tuesday in April. I received a certified letter from the county clerk's office. It was a routine notice about a zoning inquiry for my parcel. Someone had filed a request to subdivide the lot. When I called to ask, the clerk said the inquiry had been submitted by a M. Henderson, my son's full name. He claimed he was gathering information for future estate planning. He hadn't mentioned a word to me. Subdividing the land would have cut the property value in half and made his portion much easier to sell quickly, without my approval. That's when I installed the security system at the main house with cameras and audio sensors. I told Michael it was for insurance discounts. In reality, I needed to know what happened when I wasn't there. The footage showed weekend parties I hadn't authorized, with strangers and strange cars. It showed Michael giving tour to a man in a polo shirt, pointing at property lines. I saved every clip. The final piece clicked into place during that fateful conference call. My financial advisor, David, was reviewing my retirement funds. We were discussing safe withdrawals when the audio glitched and another line bled through. It was Michael and Chloe, their voices clear, thinking I had hung up. They were discussing the realtor's latest offer. Chloe said, "If we list before he consults a lawyer, we control the narrative. We say he agreed to sell to help us. By the time he disputes it, the title company will have processed everything." Michael replied, "The key is moving before he realizes his name on the deed doesn't mean he can stop a sale if I initiate it. We just need his signature on one form under the right pretense." That's when my finger found the record button on my phone. I captured 7 minutes of a detailed, cold-blooded strategy to leverage my trust into their windfall. I stayed on the silent line long after they hung up, listening to the empty hum. The recording was saved, then backed up in 3 separate places. I was now in possession of their entire plan, but in my state, that recording might be illegal. I was part of the conversation, which in a one-party consent state would make it admissible, but the legal risk was real. Presenting it could backfire spectacularly. I had evidence, but it was potentially toxic evidence. I drove to the lake house that weekend under the guise of checking on a leaky faucet. The guest cabin showed signs of neglect. The dock they promised to repair was sagging. In the main house, I went straight to my office drawer. The original deed and the amendment adding Michael's name were there. I read the joint tenancy clause for the 100th time. In the eyes of the law, we were equal partners. Either of us could force a sale through a partition action. My son didn't just want to sell. He had the legal leverage to make it happen against my will. My own signature had built the trap. Sitting alone in the quiet house, the weight of the betrayal was absolute. This was no misunderstanding. It was a financial takeover disguised as family help. I had 2 options. I could confront them and risk a brutal legal war that would shatter the family forever, or I could do nothing and watch a lifetime of memories be sold off in a 30-day closing. But I had a third option, one I'd learned from 40 years in business. The best defense is a preemptive move they never see coming. I opened my laptop and searched for the most ruthless property litigation attorney in the state. The first consultation was scheduled for Monday morning. I would walk in with my recording, my deed, and one question: how do I save my home without going to jail? The battle for the lake house began not with a shout, but with a silent click of a mouse, booking a meeting that would change everything. Margot Vance's law office was on the 22nd floor, all glass and steel, a fortress built on billing in 6-minute increments. She was 50, with a sharp gaze that missed nothing and a reputation for winning partition actions by any means necessary. I placed my phone on her desk, the recording already queued. Before I could speak, she held up a hand. "First, Mr. Henderson, where are we, one-party or all-party consent state?" I told her. She nodded, a flicker of approval. "You're legal. Now let's hear the crime." We listened in silence. When it ended, she leaned back. "They're arrogant. They're also correct about one thing. With his name on the deed as a joint tenant, he has the right to file for a partition sale. The court would likely grant it. Your emotional attachment is not a legal defense." My heart sank. Then she leaned forward. "But their arrogance is their mistake. They've given us their entire playbook. We don't fight the partition, we accelerate it." Her strategy was a legal blitzkrieg. First, we would file a partition action ourselves, preempting Michael. This would frame me as the proactive, rational party seeking a fair division, and him as the hidden schemer. Second, we would immediately file a lease pendens, a notice on the property title warning any potential buyer that the asset was in active litigation, freezing any sale they might try to sneak through. Third, and most critical, we would use the recording not as evidence of a crime, but as proof of unclean hands and bad faith, to argue for a skewed division of sale proceeds. If we could prove he intended to defraud me, the judge might award me 70, even 80% of the final sale. "It's risky," Margot said. "It turns a family dispute into a public court battle. It will cost you 40, maybe 50,000 in legal fees, and it guarantees the lake house will be sold. The only thing left to fight over is the money." I looked out her window at the city below. The choice was utter loss or a scorched earth victory that left me with a check but no home. I signed the engagement letter. The war was now official. The first shot was the lease pendens. It was filed electronically at 4 p.m. on a Thursday. At 7:15, my phone rang. It was Michael. "Dad, what the hell is this? I just got a call from the title company. They said there's a cloud on the title. Did you do something?" His voice was a mix of panic and fury. I kept my tone flat, rehearsed. "I filed a notice of pending litigation, Michael. Since there seems to be a disagreement about the property's future, I'm making sure nothing happens until a judge sorts it out." The silence was profound. Then, "You're suing me, your own son." "I'm protecting my interest," I said. "As are you, apparently." He hung up. The next 48 hours were a storm of frantic activity. captured in texts and voicemails I saved. Chloe called, crying, saying this was a horrible misunderstanding. Michael texted, demanding I withdraw the filing or he'd cut off all contact. Then a new voice entered the fray, the realtor. A man named Gregson left a blunt voicemail. "Mr. Henderson, this is highly unprofessional. You're sabotaging a signed listing agreement. My clients have incurred damages. Retract the lease pendants immediately or we will be forced to pursue legal remedies." Margot played it twice and laughed. "They have no damages. They have no sale. But this is good. It shows the realtor was already engaged, which supports our timeline of a covert sale." Following Margot's directive, I began a covert audit of everything. I accessed the county's online property portal. There it was, a permit application filed 2 weeks prior, not for subdivision, but for a substantial renovation of the guest cabin. The estimated cost was $120,000. The applicant was Michael Henderson. The purpose was listed as primary residence conversion. He wasn't just planning to sell. He was planning to borrow against the property's value to fund construction, increasing his equity stake and making a future buyout impossible for me. It was a financial trench, dug in secret. I drove to the lake house the next day unannounced. A pickup truck with a ladder rack was in the driveway. A man in coveralls was taking measurements of the cabin's roof. Michael rushed out, blocking my path. "What are you doing here?" "It's my property," I said, walking past him. I introduced myself to the contractor. "Just giving an estimate for a full re-roof and exterior siding," the man said cheerfully. "Your son here says he's getting ready to make this his year-round place." I looked at Michael. His face was pale. "We'll talk later," I said and left. In the car, my hands shook. The primary residence lie was a new level. It could trigger homestead exemptions, complicate a sale, and was likely fraud if he used it to secure a loan. That night I did something Margot hadn't advised. I logged into an old family cloud storage account I'd paid for, one Michael might have forgotten about. I hadn't. The password was his childhood dog's name. Inside, I found a folder labeled Lake House Plans. It contained not just contractor quotes, but email drafts. One, addressed to me, was a heartfelt plea for a loan to finally put down roots. Another, to a mortgage broker, stated, "I am the sole owner of the property, seeking a cash-out refinance based on my equity." The date on that draft was 3 days after our meeting where he'd asked about my will. The pivot was staggering. This wasn't a rushed plan born of greed. It was a calculated, long-term scheme to systematically transfer ownership from me to him, using my own assets and signature as the tools. I brought it all to Margot. She scanned the documents, her expression grim. "This moves us from bad faith to potential fraud, but it's from a shared cloud account. Admissibility is a gray area. It could be seen as hacking." She steepled her fingers. "We need something indisputable, a paper trail from a third party." She suggested a forensic title search, digging into every transaction linked to the property for the last 5 years. I authorized it, another $5,000. While the title search worked, the psychological war intensified. Chloe's parents called me. "We're so disappointed in you, Robert," her father said. "You're tearing a family apart over a piece of land." I simply replied, "Ask your daughter about the mortgage application she co-signed." The line went quiet. They hadn't known. The isolation was total. My brother called, saying Michael had told him I was having mental health issues, becoming paranoid and litigious. The narrative was being built. I was the unstable old man lashing out. The forensic search returned a week later with a thermonuclear revelation. It wasn't just the recent permit. 18 months ago, when property taxes were paid, Michael had filed a document with the county assessor claiming a family transfer of a portion of the title, which had slightly reduced the taxable value for his portion. It was a minor bureaucratic form, but its legal language was clear. It was a step toward formally segregating his interest from mine, a precursor to a standalone sale. And he'd used a notary. The notary's journal would have a record of who signed it. Margot sent an intern to the notary. The journal entry showed the signature, mine. It was a flawless forgery. The notary, a woman at a package shipping store, recalled a nice young couple but couldn't identify the signatory from a photo. It didn't matter. The document was in the county system. Its existence was a felony. Margot looked at me across her desk. This changes everything. We're no longer in civil court. We are now in the realm of criminal fraud. You have a decision to make. We can use this as leverage in our partition case to demand 90% of the proceeds and his quick surrender. Or we can file a police report. The bridge to Act 2B was a chasm. One path was a brutal financial settlement that would leave me rich but utterly alone. The other was pressing charges against my only son, guaranteeing a life sentence for our relationship and a permanent family scar. I left her office with the forged document in my briefcase. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey and 2 phones in front of me. One was connected to Margot Vance on speed dial. The other was connected to my son's number. I had to choose which one to call and what to say. The next move would define not just who got the lake house, but who I was and what was left of my family when the last legal document was signed. The quiet of the house was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the clock and the echo of a notary's stamp on a lie that changed everything. I didn't call Margot that night, and I didn't call my son. I poured the whiskey down the drain and drove to the county courthouse as the sun was coming up. The records office opened at 8. I requested the complete certified file for my property, every document ever recorded. The clerk handed me a stack 2 inches thick. In a quiet corner, I found it. The fraudulent family transfer form. It was recorded, meaning it was part of the official chain of title. Any future buyer would see it. Any bank would see it. The forgery wasn't just a crime. It was now a permanent stain on the property's history, lowering its value for everyone. Michael hadn't just stolen from me, he damaged the asset itself. I went to Margot's office with the certified copy. "We're not filing a police report," I said. "Not yet. We're going to use this to get everything." She understood. Leverage, not vengeance. That afternoon, she drafted a new settlement offer. We would drop the partition action and quitclaim my interest to Michael, but only if he first paid me $250,000, the appraised value of my half, and assumed the entire mortgage. He would get the lake house free and clear, but he'd have to find $250,000 to buy me out. It was an offer designed to be impossible for him to accept, pushing him to the bargaining table where we could then reveal the forgery and demand even more. We served the papers at his apartment. His response came not through his lawyer but through social media. That evening, Chloe posted a lengthy, tearful video. "Family should be about love, not money," she said, looking directly into the camera. "We're heartbroken that a parent would use the legal system to punish his own child for wanting to build a life." She didn't mention the forgery, the recording, or the secret listing. The comments flooded in. "Boomer greed," one read. "Cut him off and never look back," said another. My email filled with hate from strangers. The court of public opinion had ruled and I was the villain. Then came the countersuit. Michael's lawyer, a slick corporate attorney named Daniels, filed a motion to have me removed from the deed entirely. His argument: undue influence and diminished capacity. They claimed my decision to add Michael to the deed in the first place was the product of age-related confusion, and that I was now exploiting the joint ownership to harass him. As evidence, they submitted affidavits from Chloe's parents and my own brother, stating I had become forgetful and paranoid in recent years. They were gaslighting me through the legal system, using my age as a weapon. The wait, it gets worse, moment wasn't a new document. It was the horrifying realization that my own family was willing to declare me incompetent to get what they wanted. Margot was furious. "This is a nuclear option. If they succeed, you could lose not just the lake house, but control over all your assets. We need to prove your competency immediately." She arranged for a battery of cognitive tests with a neurologist. I passed flawlessly, but the damage was done. The allegation was now part of the court record, a poison that would linger. While we fought the competency claim, Margot's private investigator made a breakthrough. He'd been digging into the realtor, Gregson. It turned out Gregson wasn't just any agent. He was Chloe's first cousin. This wasn't a random professional relationship. It was a coordinated family effort. More importantly, the investigator found that Gregson's real estate license had been suspended for 6 months 5 years ago for fraudulent dual agency, representing both buyer and seller without disclosure. He was a risky partner. This connection gave us a new angle: conspiracy. We could argue Michael and Chloe had engaged in a scheme with a known bad actor to defraud me. Armed with this, Margot scheduled a mediation. The court ordered it. We sat in a sterile conference room, me, Margot, Michael, Chloe, and their lawyer, Daniels. For 2 hours, they portrayed me as a stubborn old man blocking his son's future. They offered a pittance, $50,000 for my half. I slid the certified copy of the forged document across the table. Then I played 30 seconds of the recording, the part where they discussed controlling the narrative before I could get a lawyer. The color drained from Michael's face. Chloe started crying again, but this time it was real panic. Daniels asked for a private recess. When we reconvened, his tone had changed. My clients acknowledge there have been miscommunications. They are willing to increase their offer to $100,000. Margot didn't blink. Our offer stands, $250,000, and they assume the debt. Or we file this forgery with the district attorney tomorrow morning and amend our complaint to include intentional infliction of emotional distress and civil fraud. The discovery process will be thorough. We will subpoena every text, every email, every financial record between them for the last 3 years. She let that hang in the air. You have 24 hours. We left feeling victorious. We had them cornered, but we had underestimated their desperation. That night I got a call from my mortgage lender. There had been a payment default. I was current on my payments, I had the bank statements. But the lender said they'd received a fax, purportedly from me, requesting a forbearance due to financial hardship, which had triggered a review of the loan. The signature was, of course, a forgery. The loan was now under scrutiny. If they declared a default, they could call the entire note due, a sum I couldn't possibly pay. Michael and Chloe were no longer just fighting for the lake house. They were trying to burn it down around me so no one could have it. I drove to the lake house one last time. The for sale sign was now in the yard, planted by Gregson despite the lease pendants. It felt like a funeral. As I walked the dock, my neighbor Tom, an elderly man who'd been there 40 years, came over. Saw the sign, Robert. Hate to see it go. I nodded, unable to speak. Then he said, saw something else too, last week. A surveyor, not the county guy, a private one. He was marking pins way down by the water line on the conservation easement. My blood ran cold. The conservation easement was a legally protected strip of land along the shore where no development was allowed. It comprised 1/3 of the property's acreage. If it was somehow removed or violated, the land value would double overnight. But it was perpetual, unchangeable, or so I thought. I called Margot. She made one phone call to the land trust that held the easement. The representative was confused. We received a formal request to vacate the easement 2 months ago, citing changed circumstances and mutual agreement of the benefited parties. We denied it, of course. She paused. But the request was cautioned by both owners, you and a Michael Henderson, another forgery. This one wasn't about money. It was about permanently destroying an environmental protection to inflate a price tag. The scale of the betrayal was no longer just personal or financial. It was ethical. It was monstrous. I sat in my car, staring at the for sale sign. The recording, the forged tax form, the fake loan default, the attempted easement vacation, each was a domino. Michael wasn't just trying to win. He was systematically dismantling every protection, legal, financial, ethical, that stood in his way. And I had given him the first tool, his name on the deed. The transition from victim to combatant was complete. I wasn't fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting to prove that the law could still distinguish between right and wrong, even within a family. I started the car. I wasn't going home. I was driving to the district attorney's office. The time for leverage was over. The time for consequences was about to begin. The battle for the lake house was about to become a war for justice, and I was ready to burn every bridge, including the one that led back to my son, to see it through. The district attorney's office was in a brutalist concrete building downtown, a place designed to process consequences, not emotions. I handed the file, the recording transcript, the certified forged documents, the loan interference facts, the easement paperwork, to a white-collar crimes investigator named Alvarez. He listened for an hour without interruption, then asked one question. "Why now? You could have settled and taken the money." I told him, "Because if I take the money, the crime succeeds. And then it's just a business lesson for him, how to steal from your father correctly." Alvarez nodded, closed the folder. "We'll open an investigation. It'll take time." Time was the one thing the legal system had in abundance. The civil case and the criminal investigation ran on parallel tracks, each slowing the other. The competency claim against me was the first to collapse. Under deposition, my brother admitted Michael had pressured him to sign the affidavit, offering to cover his gambling debts. The judge dismissed the motion and sanctioned their lawyer, Daniels, for pursuing a frivolous claim. It was a small, technical victory, but it shifted the momentum. The criminal investigation moved silently, a submarine in deep water. Subpoenas were issued to the bank, the title company, and the realtor Gregson. Gregson, facing the suspension of his newly reinstated license, cut a deal. He provided emails showing Chloe had instructed him to list the property, as if we have sole authority, and to fast-track any offer over $300,000. He also revealed Michael had applied for a home equity loan on the property 2 weeks before the recording, using the forged family transfer document as proof of increased ownership stake. The bank had approved $150,000. The money was already spent on a down payment for a new construction condo for him and Chloe. This was the final piece. The loan was bank fraud. The district attorney now had a paper trail leading directly from the forgery to a financial institution. The case moved from investigation to indictment. Michael and Chloe were charged with 3 felonies: forgery, recording a false document, and bank fraud. They were arrested at their apartment on a Tuesday morning. I read about it in the news alert on my phone. There was no satisfaction, only a hollow, deafening silence. The civil case became a formality. With criminal charges pending, their lawyer advised them to settle immediately to avoid a judgment that could be used against them in criminal court. Margot negotiated the final terms. The lake house would be sold on the open market. From the proceeds, the $150,000 fraudulent loan would be repaid to the bank first. Then I would be paid $200,000, the fair market value of my half, plus $50,000 in legal fees and damages. Michael and Chloe would split the remainder, if any. Given the mortgage and the need to repay the loan, the remainder was calculated to be approximately $30,000. Their $300,000 windfall had evaporated, leaving them with debt, legal bills, and felony charges. Sale happened in the spring. A young family from the city bought it, paying $410,000. They had 2 little girls who immediately ran down to the dock. I signed the closing papers in the title company's office alone. The check was wired to my account. I transferred $200,000 to a new account, the rest to pay off my mortgage and Margot's fees. I was financially whole. I was also homeless in the emotional sense. The place that held my history was now someone else's future. The criminal trial was a short, brutal affair. Michael and Chloe took a plea deal. The bank fraud charge was dropped in exchange for guilty pleas to the forgery counts. He was sentenced to 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory financial counseling. She received 2 years probation. They were ordered to pay $10,000 in restitution to the county for the cost of the investigation. Their records would be expunged after 5 years if they complied. It was a slap on the wrist, but it was a permanent mark. Michael lost his job in finance. Chloe's family, finally seeing the evidence, cut them off financially. They moved out of state. I received one letter from Michael 6 months after the sentencing. It was not an apology. It was a single line typed, "You won, I hope it was worth it." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The bridge wasn't burned, it was revealed to have never existed. I had loved an idea of a son, and he had seen a mark. Surprising detail came a year later from Tom, my old neighbor. He called me, his voice excited. "Robert, you won't believe it. The new owners were cleaning out the crawl space under the main house. They found an old metal box. Inside were stock certificates from the 1950s made out to your grandfather. Blue chip stuff. They tracked me down to get your number. They want to give them to you." The certificates were for companies that no longer existed, but their successor corporations were giants. The paper was worth about $15,000 as a curiosity, but the gesture was everything. The new family had no obligation to contact me. They did it because it was right. I met them at the lake house one last time. The husband handed me the box. "This belongs to your family," he said. His little girls were swimming off the dock, the same water I'd swum in as a boy. I looked at the house, painted a fresh blue, flowers in boxes where there had been weeds. It was loved again. I gave the certificates to a historical society. The money didn't matter. The closure did. I used part of the settlement to buy a small condo near the ocean, a place with no history, no memories, and a view of endless water. I started volunteering with a nonprofit that helps seniors navigate estate planning and fraud prevention. I tell my story, without names, as a cautionary tale. The pain became purpose. The final loop closed on a random Tuesday. I was at the grocery store. I saw Chloe. She was in the checkout line alone, looking tired and older. She didn't see me. Her cart was full of generic brands, diapers, and formula. She had a baby. I stood frozen, watching her load her bags into a beat-up sedan. A part of me ached for the grandchild I would never know. Another part, harder and colder, remembered the recording, her laugh, the word narrative. I got in my car and drove away. Some wounds don't heal. They just become landmarks you learn to navigate around. The lake house was gone. The sun was gone, but I was still here. The justice I got was not the dramatic victory I'd imagined in Margot Vance's office. It was quiet, expensive, and left scars on everyone. But it was justice. It proved that the law, for all its sluggishness, could still draw a line between right and wrong. It proved that even family trust has limits, and when those limits are breached, you have the right to rebuild your walls, even if you rebuild them alone. I sit on my new balcony now, listening to the ocean instead of the lake. The silence is no longer deafening, it's peaceful. I earned this peace. I paid for it with every memory of that dock, every Sunday phone call that was a lie, every signature I gave in love that was used as a weapon. The transaction is complete. The ledger is closed. The story of the lake house is over, but my story on my terms is finally beginning. So what is the price of setting a boundary with someone you love? It's not measured in legal fees or property values. It's measured in silence where there was once conversation, in empty space where there was once family, in the profound and unsettling peace of a life no longer governed by manipulation. My story isn't unique. In courtrooms and mediation offices every day, families are fracturing over assets, over inheritances, over the dangerous illusion that shared blood means shared entitlement. The lake house was just the physical object. The real battle was for autonomy, for the right to say, "This is mine," without being called a monster, for the right to protect what you've built, even from the people you built it for. The legal system provided a framework, but it couldn't provide absolution. It could label a forgery, sanction a frivolous claim, and enforce a sale, but it couldn't answer the deeper question. When does helping become enabling, and when does love require saying no? I learned that the hardest truth isn't that someone you love can betray you. It's that you must choose yourself when they do. That choice leaves scars, but the alternative, allowing yourself to be quietly dismantled, leaves a void nothing can fill. If you take one thing from this story, let it be this: trust is not a blank check. Love is not a waiver of your rights. Whether it's a lake house, a retirement account, or simply your peace of mind, you are allowed to build fences. You are allowed to demand transparency. You are allowed to record a conversation when your gut tells you something is wrong. The law, in most places, will protect that act of self-preservation. Use it. Protect what's yours, not out of greed, but out of respect for the life you've lived and the person you are. My lake house is gone, my son is gone, but I am here and I am free. The cost was everything I thought my future would be. The reward is a present I can finally live in without suspicion, without debt, without the chilling fear that my own kindness is being weaponized against me. That trade was worth it. If you found this story compelling, if it made you think about the lines you've drawn or need to draw in your own life, please show your support. Like this video. Share your own thoughts or experiences in the comments below. These conversations matter. And subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the real human stories behind the headlines, where justice, family, and survival intersect. Thank you for listening.